Hey, thanks for watching another video from weldingtipsandtricks.com. I'm Jody Collier.
And I'm Andrew Cotton.
Got Andrew here on loan from his company Nuco, a Century company. Andrew welds gas piping, a lot of downhill 60-10 stuff. One of the things that is in that world is a branch connection. Now, we don't have time to do a whole branch connection of cutting and coping and saddling and everything. What we did have time to do was a little mock-up plate test, one bevel and one square cut, that very much resembles part of that branch test. So that's what we're going to do today. It's easy to get the materials to do this. These materials were supplied by Triangle Engineering. Big shout out to them. One bevel, one square cut plate, and again, it resembles that place that's sort of, I guess you'd call it the crotch on a branch test. So we're going to set it up overhead, run a root, 532, open root, and then fill it on out.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, this is the practice plate. One of the plates is beveled 45 degrees. The other is just a square cut. The root pass is going to be put in there with 532 60-10, 532 70-10 for the hot pass, and then we're going to 3/16 70-10 for the fill and cap. Here's a little quick sketch of the joint, just in case the video doesn't show it clear enough. One piece is beveled 45 degrees, the other is square cut. All right, here it is. As you can see, it's not completely clear what's going on here. That's why I put the sketch in there. So Andrew is popping the wedge in there because the previous one that we welded shrunk shut after just a couple of inches. There's nothing really rigid enough to hold it from shrinking like there would be on a pipe. So this is a little homemade wedge. They make pipe welding wedges with hardened steel that work great. This one worked okay for what we're doing. That's about the rod angle we're going to be using for all the passes except the top passes that burn into the top plate. Then we'll be using a much more steep rod angle pointed toward the top plate. We have a 1/16 gap here. The specs really allow you a little bit more than that, but we went with a 1/16. 135 amps, 532, 60-10. All right, Andrew, what do we got going on here?
So looking at the other videos that have already been posted, you're really just keeping that rod jammed up tight in there. Watching that puddle close up nice and tight behind you, running 135 amps, a little bit hotter than what we would on a bevel plate, because you have to consider just the heat getting pulled away on that plate that's flat up above it and there's not a bevel there. So we got to go a little bit hotter, maybe travel just a tad bit slower. You're not really cranking along. And if you consider where this is on the pipe, you're not on the branch test, you're really not doing a lot of it.
So we're going to grind that one slick. That's good practice. That's called for in some procedures. And we're going to increase the amps to between 140 and 145. Can you walk us through the hot pass, Andrew?
The hot pass is going to be run similar to the plate. You might switch up your technique a little bit. On this one, the plate was warming up, so I had to start whipping out a little faster. But really notice how long I pause when I come back into the puddle. That's to make sure that the top toe of that, the top toe of the puddle really wets in and doesn't leave you with undercut.
All right, so that's the hot pass done. Now we bumped the amps up to 155 and jumped all the way up to 3/16 70-18. And now we're going to start stacking beads on here. This is going to be a total of a 3-bead, sort of a 3-bead cap. This one is just one bead over top of that because the 3/16 rod is so much bigger and we're running hotter. The bead is fanning out and tying into both walls. Walk us through this a little bit, Andrew, what you're seeing and feeling here.
Yeah, again, it's just going to be the same type of technique. You'll see that my rod's starting to get hung up on a couple pieces of little spatter. Towards the end, I'm whipping out a little more so I'm not overheating the plate and it starts dripping out on me. But you're really just trying to flush it out.
Once again, this plate was getting really hot. Only let it breathe long enough to wire brush it and to kind of regroup. Kind of we're in a little bit of a hurry, but on a practice plate, you don't treat it always exactly the same as you do a test joint. You want to get that seat time in, practice time in, and that's why you're going to see a little bit of bluing here when we wire brush these things like that. That's a good hot bead, mainly because the plate is hot. We let it cool off, it will run just a little bit different.
Notice the valley that I left on top of that first pass. You're going to start to see the rod angle change, but I really want to just focus on that valley real quick. Whether you're welding 250 wall, which is about 1/4 inch, or 375 wall, which is standard pipe that we would be testing for with this 3/8 plate, you want to really watch your rod angle putting in this next pass.
So for these next two passes, the rod angle is going to be sticking a lot more straight up like this. That's different than the previous passes that we've done. And there's a reason why they call this stick welding, because you're going to stick a rod. So when your rod sticks, to avoid leaving arc strikes and dragging the tip of the rod down the pipe or whatever, it's always best if you stick the rod to just unclamp the stinger. Andrew's going to show us here. This was done on purpose. Now, it's a good practice to do that. Just unclamp the stinger, then you want to worry about having unwanted arc strikes outside the weld zone. Okay, Andrew, what are we doing here?
What I'm really focusing on is filling in that valley I just got done talking about, trying not to undercut. Now, if you do, it's not really a big deal because you can always go back over it with a third pass. On the ears of the joint, you're probably going to have about 4 or 5 passes. Underneath this crotch of the joint, you're probably going to have 2 to 3 passes. So as you can see, I'm just really holding out that time, letting that area fill in, whipping out far enough. And as you can see from the pass, there's really no undercut. But for just safe measures, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to restrike this, fill it out, and then probably put one more pass in just to give a nice even leg size on the weld.
Okay, there's a restart. Andrew started about roughly maybe 3/4 of an inch away from that crater, lit up, made all his arc strikes in an area where he's going to weld back over them, lit up in the crater, and kept going. Practicing restarts is probably one of the better things you can do. If you can make a good restart, it's not a big deal if you have to stop. If you have to sneeze or cough or something like that, you can always get right back in there and make things uniform. Here's that rod angle again for that third pass, angling straight up into that top plate, watching his arc length, holding for long enough, watching the toe of the weld on the top of that top member so that he doesn't leave undercut, and then at the same time watching to make sure he overlaps that previous bead by about halfway so that things blend in and are uniform for a nice fillet.